An old man sits on the jagged volcanic rock of an island prison. The salt wind of the Aegean Sea stings his eyes. Isaiah saw a wolf sleeping next to a lamb in the grass. Zechariah saw ancient enemies sitting together at a feast. The mandate of Eden collapsed into the law of the jungle. Survival of the fittest. A food chain soaked in blood. The 1,000-year reign is the moment the groaning stops. The curse is rolled back. The hostility is erased. The food chain is completely dismantled. This is what Basiluo looks like when it hits the ground. When the resurrected saints govern alongside Christ, they are not just managing human geopolitical systems. They are overseeing the healing of the ecosystem itself. They are watching the original parameters of creation rush back into the physical world. God is proving that his design for the earth was never a mistake. But the healing of the physical earth is only the stage. The environment is restored so that something else can finally happen, something involving an ancient, unfulfilled mandate given to the very first human beings. You feel it in your bones. Do you not? A low-grade, persistent ache that something in the world is profoundly out of alignment. You wake up in the morning to the glaring blue light of a screen, scrolling through headlines about another bombed city, another terminal diagnosis, another broken system. Your chest tightens. You step outside. Breathe in the exhaust of morning traffic. Listen to the distant wail of a siren. And a strange, quiet grief settles over you. C.S. Lewis called it the inconsolable secret. They saw a physical, dirt and water world that had not been destroyed, but a world that had been completely healed. It is the profound nostalgia for a home you have never physically visited. We spend billions of dollars on movies and virtual realities, trying to simulate a world where justice reigns, where sickness is cured, where nature is in perfect harmony with humanity. We are collectively haunted by a phantom Eden. Your longing for that world is not a psychological coping mechanism. It is a biological memory. You were engineered for a world that does not currently exist. When God placed the first humans in the garden, he gave them a mandate: to rule, to subdue, to expand the borders of that flourishing paradise out into the wild. Untamed earth. The dirt was supposed to respond to their hands. Work was designed to be deeply satisfying, without the agonizing friction of thorns and thistles. But we surrendered the keys to a serpent, and the earth has been fighting us ever since. Right now, your labor feels like a battle. You pour your energy into a career, into raising children, into fixing what is broken, and you are met with endless resistance. The soil yields thorns. The systems corrupt. The body breaks down. You go to sleep exhausted, knowing that tomorrow the friction will begin all over again. The millennium is the moment the keys are finally handed back. This is why a physical, 1,000-year reign on the earth is so vital to the biblical story. If God simply raptures his people, most people assume the 1,000-year reign of Revelation 20 is just an eschatological puzzle. They read the text like a cryptic calendar, into an ethereal cloud, and leaves the physical earth as a burning cinder. The original mandate of humanity is left hanging in the void. It means humanity failed. And God had to scrap the project. God does not scrap his projects. The 1,000 years is the promised window, where you actually get to do what you were originally built to do. When you reign with Christ, you will not be floating. You will be cultivating. You will be building culture, organizing society, and stewarding a physical creation that finally cooperates with your touch. The Phantom Eden will become the tangible dirt beneath your feet. But the restoration of the earth is only half the miracle, because there is another prophet, standing in the dusty rubble of a broken city, who sees exactly how the nations will interact when the healing is complete. And the image he sees does not involve a throne room. It involves a table. Zechariah stands in the dust. The temple is rubble. The walls are shattered. The people are traumatized. He is standing in the wreckage of a city that has just been completely gutted by a foreign empire. He looks into the future. He sees the city rebuilt, but it is not a fortress. It is a dining room. The smell of roasted meat fills the air. arguing endlessly over pre-tribulation, post-millennial, or amillennial frameworks. We treat this millennium as a strange logistical parenthesis, a weird 1,000-year waiting room. Heavy cups of wine clink together. Laughter echoes off the stone streets. Zechariah chapter 14 describes a stunning scene during the millennial era. He sees the nations traveling to Jerusalem year after year. They are not marching. They are walking. They are coming to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. The Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot, was the final festival of the ancient Jewish year. It was the great celebration of the final harvest. It was a time of immense joy, where people lived out in the open, under branches, remembering that God dwelt with them in the wilderness. But look closely at who is sitting at this millennial table. Zechariah writes that it is everyone who survives of all the nations that have come against Jerusalem. The people who built the siege ramps, the people who burned the gates, the people who swung the swords. They drop their weapons. They pick up bread. They sit down. The Egyptian sits next to the Israelite. The Assyrian breaks bread with the Jew. The Roman soldier drinks wine with the martyr, the victim, and the oppressor. Both completely healed, sit under the exact same canopy. The heavy iron weapons that defined their history have been melted down into farming tools. They marched. They conquered. They bled. Now, they eat. They laugh. They rest. The millennium is not a geopolitical summit. It is a family reunion. God has to manage before he can finally get to the good part and create the new heavens and the new earth. When the dragon is locked in the abyss, the intoxicating drug of tribalism finally wears off. The artificial, blood-soaked lines drawn on our maps dissolve. The 1,000-year reign proves that other human beings were never the actual enemy. We were hostages. And when the hostage taker is removed, the hostages look across the table and realize they are brothers. This is the ultimate ingathering of the nations. The trauma of human history is finally metabolizing into joy. But this 1,000-year feast is not just about resolving human conflict. It is the fulfillment of a mathematical pattern embedded in the very first pages of the Bible. There is a clock ticking beneath the text of Scripture. The early church fathers heard it. The ancient rabbis mapped it. They looked at the very first page of Genesis, read the account of creation, and they noticed a mathematical rhythm. 6 days of intense, chaotic, constrictive labor. 6 days of separating light from darkness, pulling land from the water, shaping the dirt. And then, a 7th day. A day where the heavy hammer drops into the dirt. A day where the frantic motion completely stops. Genesis chapter 2, verse 2. And on the 7th day God finished his work that he had done. And he rested. We obsess over the sequence of events. We build timelines to predict when the clock starts ticking. The English translations feel passive. But the Hebrew word used here is the word Shabbat. It is the root of the word Sabbath, and its primary meaning is much sharper than mere relaxation. Shabbat does not mean to take a nap. It does not mean to recline because you are physically exhausted. The word literally means to cease, to stop, to sever the activity. It is the heavy, golden quiet that falls over a Jewish home when the sun dips below the horizon and the candles are lit. For thousands of years, ancient theology has operated on a prophetic equation based on this exact rhythm. Psalm 90 and the letters of Peter both declare that to the Lord, one day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as one day. If you lay that equation over the Genesis creation week, a startling historical timeline emerges. 6 days of work, 6,000 years of human history, 6 millennia of empire building, of bloodshed, of pulling resources from a stubborn earth, of fighting the endless friction of the curse, 6,000 years of the accuser pacing back and forth across the globe. And then, the 7th day arrives. The 7th millennium. The 1,000-year reign of Revelation 20 is not a random logistical parenthesis. It is the cosmic Sabbath. But if you look closer at the specific Greek vocabulary John chooses, at the ancient Hebrew imagery he is pulling from, it is the grand, Restorative Friday night of human history. God does not just want to rescue his people, he wants to give them their rest. The writer of Hebrews saw this perfectly in chapter 4 when he looked at the future and wrote, "So then, there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God." This is why the dragon must be bound in the abyss. You cannot rest if a predator is pacing outside your window. This is why the food chain must be dismantled. You cannot rest if the earth is still groaning in pain. This is why the warring nations must sit down at a feast. You cannot rest if you are still sharpening your sword. The Millennium is the ultimate fulfillment of the seventh day. It is a 1,000-year exhalation for a planet that has been holding its breath since Eden. It is the time for the dirt to recover, for the trauma to metabolize, and for humanity to govern the way they were always supposed to govern. But a Sabbath eventually ends. And what happens when the 1,000 years are finally over brings the entire story to its staggering, ultimate conclusion. John wrote down a number in a dark cave, and a fractured world received an expiration date. And at the deeply Jewish theology of the Sabbath, you start to see something the timeline-obsessed reading completely misses. An angel wrapped a heavy iron chain around the serpent, and the deafening frequency of deception finally went quiet. The martyrs took their seats on earthly thrones, and a traumatized planet received the stewards it was always designed for. A wolf folded its legs in the grass next to a lamb, and the bloody law of the jungle was completely dismantled. The phantom memory of Eden became tangible dirt, and the original mandate of humanity was handed back. An ancient soldier sat down to break bread with his victim, and the bitter geopolitical lines of history dissolved into joy. A 6,000-year week of grueling labor ended, and a bleeding earth exhaled into its cosmic rest. One timeline. One complete restoration. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the chain. An angel wrapping heavy metal around the dragon. Not simply to punish an enemy, but to silence the static. To stop the deception. For 6,000 years, we have breathed the accuser's lies about scarcity, fear, and tribalism like oxygen. We have breathed it for so long that we assume the violence and the anxiety are just human nature. The 1,000-year reign proves that the violence is not human nature. It is a hostage situation, and the hostage taker is finally being removed. The Millennium is not a waiting room. It is a reclamation. We are a people obsessed with how things end because we are exhausted by how things are. If you are in a season where the friction of this world feels absolutely unbearable, where your work yields thorns, where your physical body aches, or where the noise of anxiety in your mind is deafening, you do not need an escape hatch. You need to look at the clock. The week of exhaustion is almost over. The Friday evening of human history is approaching. The seventh day is coming. If this reached something in you, subscribe. Leave a comment, even one word helps. Share this with someone who is exhausted by the state of the world and needs to know how the story actually ends. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. And may the God who has never once abandoned the dirt he shaped with his own hands walk with you through your 6 days of labor until the morning breaks. The static clears, and your Sabbath finally begins. We look at the violence in our streets, the sickness in our bodies, the corruption in our systems, and we want an escape hatch. His hands, calloused and trembling with age, press a reed pen against coarse parchment. He is writing down things that defy human language. We want God to just burn the whole thing down and start over. And because we want an escape hatch, we read the book of Revelation as an evacuation plan. Jesus was not offering an evacuation plan. He was promising a vindication, to feel the weight of what John is writing in that cave. You have to realize that this 1,000-year period is the answer to a trauma humanity has been carrying since Genesis chapter 3. It is the ultimate proof that God does not abandon what he creates. But the detail that changes how you read every prophecy about this era does not begin with a timeline. Picture the ink drying on John's parchment. The wind howls outside the cave on Patmos as the old apostle stares at the Greek letters. He just scratched out in the dim light. Chilioi, 1,000. He does not draw a timeline in the margins. But if you walk into almost any modern seminary or church basement today, timelines are exactly what you will find. You can hear the squeak of dry erase markers on whiteboards as well-meaning teachers try to map out the unmappable. You can hear the heavy thud of 600-page commentaries landing on wooden desks. For over a century, Western Christianity has been locked, a dragon violently thrown into a bottomless abyss, a heavy iron chain clanking against the dark, a lock turning over an ancient enemy, in a bitter, dizzying debate about how to organize the end of the world. We divide ourselves into camps with heavy academic labels: premillennialism, postmillennialism, amillennialism. If you are not familiar with the terms, they simply represent different ways of arranging the furniture of the apocalypse. One camp says the world gets worse until Jesus returns to establish a literal 1,000-year kingdom on the dirt. Another camp says the church will slowly conquer the world with the gospel, ushering in a golden age of peace before Jesus finally comes back. And a third camp insists the 1,000 years is purely symbolic, a metaphor for the spiritual reign of Christ happening right now in the unseen realm. We argue about the sequence. We fight over the logistics. But in our obsession with figuring out exactly when the millennium happens, we completely miss the staggering reality of why it has to happen in the first place. The Western mind approaches the book of Revelation like a chronological puzzle that needs to be solved with the right decoder ring. We assume that if we can just align the geopolitical headlines of our day with the terrifying imagery of John's visions, we will finally understand what God is doing. We treat the physical earth like a condemned building, a sinking ship that God is simply managing until he can finally evacuate the righteous. And then, he writes down a duration: 1,000 years. He writes it 6 times in the span of 7 short verses, and burned the whole thing to the ground. The millennium is not a logistical waiting room. It is a theological necessity. To the ancient Jewish mind, salvation was never about escaping the physical world to float on ethereal clouds in an immaterial heaven. The God of Genesis chapter 1 called the physical dirt the flowing water, and the biological bodies of his creation very good. If the story of redemption ends with God simply abandoning the earth to the corruption of sin, then the enemy wins the argument. If God has to scrap the original project and start over completely, then the rebellion that started in the Garden of Eden was ultimately successful. God does not abandon his projects. He reclaims them. The 1,000-year reign is the ultimate demonstration that God is capable of healing the exact same world that was broken by human sin. It is a profoundly necessary chapter of vindication, where the earth itself gets to experience what it was always supposed to be, before the final, eternal state of the new heavens and the new earth begins. But the most shocking detail about this era is not the timeline. It is the very first thing John sees happening the moment the 1,000-year clock starts ticking. And it involves a heavy iron chain. Heaven splits open. An angel steps down. He carries no sword. He brings no army. He carries a single key. He drags a massive iron chain. 1,000 years of the dragon locked away. 1,000 years of martyrs sitting on thrones. The metal clanks heavily against the stillness. He walks directly to the dragon, the ancient serpent, the one called Devil and Satan. There is no epic struggle. There is no drawn-out negotiation. The angel seizes him. The chain wraps around the scales. The metal bites deep. He drags the ancient enemy to the edge of the abyss, a suffocating, bottomless black. He hurls him down. The heavy iron door slams shut. The key turns. A seal is pressed tightly against the lock. 1,000 years. And then, something terrifyingly beautiful happens to the earth. It goes completely quiet. John tells us exactly why the chain was necessary. He writes it clearly in verse 3. So that he might not deceive the nations any longer. Look at what is hiding in that sentence. The nations are still here. Human society is still functioning. The dirt and the oceans and the cities are still standing. But the static is gone. Since Genesis chapter 3, humanity has never known a single 24-hour period without the accuser's voice. We breathe his deception like oxygen, We build entire global economies on his whispers of scarcity. We launch brutal wars because he tells us the other side is coming for our families. We hoard wealth. We exploit the vulnerable. We destroy the physical planet because the frequency of hell has been humming in the background of human history for 6 millennia. Then, the lock turns. 1,000 years of a battered, blood-soaked earth finally breathing a long, uninterrupted sigh of relief. The frequency cuts out. The whispering stops. The binding of Satan is not just a punishment for the enemy. It is a detox for the nations. It is a 1,000-year window where the human race finally experiences what it means to live on the earth without the constant, grinding friction of demonic manipulation. God is proving a cosmic point. He is proving that when the parasite of deception is removed, his original design for human beings actually works. But silencing the enemy is only the first step. A massive vacuum has been created. If the dragon and his systems are no longer running the geopolitical structures of the world, someone else has to. John looks away from the locked door of the abyss. He looks up. He sees thrones. He sees people sitting on them. And the specific Greek word John uses to describe what these people are doing is about to shatter everything you thought you knew about your own future. Revelation chapter 20, verse 4. John is looking at a bizarre and triumphant scene. He sees the souls of those who had been executed for the testimony of Jesus, the people who were crushed by the geopolitical beast of their day. He says they came to life. And then he writes down their job description for the next 1,000 years. English Bibles translate the phrase simply, they reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. It is a duration that will eventually fracture denominations. It will spawn thousands of books, massive whiteboard charts, and endless late-night debates. For most of us, the word reign conjures a very specific, passive image. We imagine sitting on a velvet cushion in a silent palace, wearing a heavy crown, watching eternity slip by, while angelic choirs hum in the background. We imagine disembodied rest. But the word translated reigned here is the Greek verb basiluo. It comes from the root noun basileus, meaning a king or a sovereign. But in the Greco-Roman world of the 1st century, to basiluo was not a passive state of existence. It was a fiercely active verb. To a Roman citizen, a ruler did not just sit in a chair. A ruler organized agriculture. A ruler built aqueducts to bring fresh water into diseased cities. A ruler established courts of justice and structured society for human flourishing. It was hands-on. Sweat and dirt governance. If realizing how the original Greek completely shifts these ancient promises is stirring something inside you, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week, we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So John watches them step into their new authority. And if you trace this word basiluo back just a few chapters in Revelation, you find a massive clue about where all this governing actually happens. In Revelation chapter 5, John hears the elders in heaven singing a song about these exact same redeemed people. They sing, "You have made them a kingdom and priests to our God, and they shall reign basiluo on the earth." But John is not inventing this era on the island of Patmos. He is just the first to put a hard number on it. On the earth, not in the clouds. Not plucking harps in a disembodied dimension. That location changes everything. When God locks the dragon in the abyss and removes the parasite of deception from the world, he does not just leave the remaining nations to figure it out themselves. He hands the structural keys of the planet over to the people who were most faithful to him when it cost them their lives. The Millennium is not a long vacation for the saved. It is a massive reconstruction project. It is a literal, physical administration where the resurrected saints work with Christ to rebuild a shattered planet. They are taking a world traumatized by thousands of years of war, famine, and demonic manipulation, and they are actively restoring it to its Edenic parameters. The dragon is in chains. The new administration has taken their seats. But what does a resurrected government actually look like when it touches the dirt? To see that, we have to leave the island of Patmos and travel 7 centuries backward to a prophet who saw exactly what happens to the food chain when the right king is finally on the throne, Jerusalem. 700 years before the island of Patmos, a prophet stands in a city choking on the smell of impending siege. He watches empires tear each other apart. He sees a world running on the brutal, mechanical engine of predator and prey. The strong, constantly devouring the weak. Centuries before John ever picked up his pen, other men saw this exact same window of time. But then, his vision skips the timeline. He looks past the smoke. He sees a pasture. He hears the heavy, rhythmic breathing of an apex predator. A wolf walks into a field. A lamb is standing there, small and fragile. But the lamb does not run. The wolf lowers its massive head, folds its legs, and lies down in the soft green grass next to its natural prey. Isaiah keeps looking. A leopard rests next to a young goat. A thick-maned lion lowers its jaw into a feeding trough, tearing into straw like an ox. A toddler reaches a chubby, dirt-stained hand toward the dark hole of a cobra, laughing in the afternoon sun. The snake does not strike. For centuries, theologians have looked at Isaiah chapter 11 and treated it like a spiritualized fairy tale. We strip the dirt and the fur and the fangs right out of the text. We say the wolf represents wicked nations, and the lamb represents the church. We reduce a sweeping, cosmic restoration down to a gentle metaphor about human beings finally getting along. Isaiah is not writing poetry. He is recording a biological reset. When human beings rebelled in Eden, the fracture did not just break our vertical relationship with God. It broke the soil. It introduced violence into the very genetic code of the animal kingdom. Nature itself began, as Paul would write centuries later, to groan,